edition of our Operational Reality with Rocco Million Live. I'm Rocco Million, your host. This is my group, Nonpartisans for Progress. If you haven't already done so, please join. Help us make this group a revolutionary force to educate and empower the public, to satisfy our Constitution and our public purpose. Anyway, so, a little bit about myself. I'm a disabled veteran, a high school dropout. I've taken some college classes, and I'm self-taught. I've studied the great economic thinkers like Dr. Stephanie Kelton and Dr. Michael Hudson, Ellis Winningham, Bill Mitchell, Dr. Stephen Hell, Dr. Fidel Kaboub, and studied and read the book The People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. If you haven't already done so, please look it up. And please look up Michael Hudson and read his new book, Killing the Host. Well, not his new book, but, one of his older books. Also, J is for Junk Economics. The information where we learn our actual reality. Because this is why I do what I do. We all have to participate in our democracy. We all have a civic and moral duty to participate in our democracy. That's the only way democracy even works. We all got to stand up and speak out. Wherever we're at, the only way we're going to have change is from the bottom up. We all got to stand up and speak out. And anybody can do what I'm right now. Be an expert. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be a PhD. You have to have the willingness and passion and integrity and courage to stand up and speak out. Stand against this, and things will, when we're doing this for ourselves, the videos are hard. I'm not an expert. I'm not doing this to get people to like me or to get donations. I'm simply trying to educate the public. So, the videos are not going to be, professional grade. My delivery is going to be professional. I'm not going to be wearing suits and ties, because I'm a regular person. I'm just an average person. And you don't, like I said, that's all you have to be to participate in our democracy. All right. I can speak on the reality that I have to live with every day. You can speak on the reality that you have to live with every day, and make people deal with that reality. Every time you watch the mainstream news and you hear them talking about us having the best economy in a long, long time, that's mainstream lies and scare tactics, mainstream neoliberal narratives that are based in fantasy. And this is how they get the public to ignore systemic abuse. And this is how they get the majority of us to accept the unacceptable, to be indifferent to pointless suffering and death. And, I don't know, but the people that ignore evil and ignore abuse, systemic, and are indifferent to pointless suffering. What do you think happens when you have a population that's indifferent to pointless suffering? When you have a population that is callous and barely surviving, not knowing where their meal is going to come from, not knowing if they're going to make it through the night, sleeping outside, that's a recipe for a dysfunctional, violent society. That's why I do what I do. And not because I think I'm going to win. I don't fight because I know I'm going to win. I simply fight because I refuse to be the type of person who accepts evil in my name. I refuse to accept systemic abuse carried out in my name. I refuse to leave my kids a future worse off without at least trying to fight back. without at least using the simple logic of our actual operational reality to destroy the mainstream lies and scare tactics that are based in fantasy. With simple logic. That's how washing. You know, that's how you destroy our brainwashing. Don't let anything stop you from video glitches like I'm having now. Because I'm an average person, I'm a burnout, I'm an addict. I forget, I lose my train of thought. I forget where I'm at. It's very hard to put a video together. To put this information together and make it flow in a very succinct way, so that everybody can understand it and everyone can, really get what I'm putting down. It's hard to do that. So every time this video freezes, I'm getting stuck. I'm like, I forget where I'm at. I got to go back and start over to make sure the people are hearing, because this is so important. We have to have a counterweight to the lies and scare tactics we see every day on the mainstream news and in the mainstream media and talking to people, and a perfect example of that is, the way that our officials and the mainstream and everybody will just, say that we have a great economy right now. Maybe one of the best ever since maybe ever in our history. This is a bold-faced lie, and it's completely a slap in the face to the millions of people that are forced to be unemployed and poor through no fault of their own. This is, the public ignores the systemic abuse that forces the majority of Americans to work starvation wage jobs. The majority works starvation wage jobs. All right. We have no disposable income for people to buy anything right now. And this is not my opinion. This is evidenced by the record amounts of private household debt we have. All right. That if you have a good economy, a balanced economy, you don't have tons of unsustainable private debt. People don't need credit cards to buy milk and eggs. People don't need credit for healthcare. People don't need credit to go to, for everything. A good economy doesn't see the majority of their people living a precarious existence, through no fault of their own. A good economy doesn't see the majority living under artificial scarcity and class war. That's why I do what I do. And that's why I'm begging you to join. This is why I'm begging you to join me. Look at this meme. I'm going to put this up. Maybe this will help me, the feed stay together better. But everyone's worried about stopping terrorism. Well, there's really an easy way to do it. Stop participating in that terrorism. This is Noam Chomsky. He's a scholar. I don't agree with everything he says. I think he's a little too easy on the Democrats sometimes, but he's a very, very great thinker of our time, one of the best thinkers of our time. But he says here, everyone's worried about stopping terrorism. Well, there's a really easy way. Stop participating in it. All right. When you put profit over people in society, you can't be surprised when your society loses its humanity. When you treat people like enemy combatants, you can't be surprised when those people respond. So this is why I do what I do. Again, it's our civic and moral duty to oppose systemic abuse and evil carried out in our name. In other words, it's our civic and moral duty to stand united in solidarity against our bipartisan, right-wing neoliberal status quo. We can't let the public ignore the brutality of our reality. We can't let people stay brainwashed by mainstream, specifically designed to make us rationalize the evil and the abuses carried out in our names every day. These mainstream neoliberal narratives are based in fantasy. Again, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand that a population that ignores systemic abuse and evil, and a population that's indifferent to pointless human suffering and death, this is why our society is so violent and dysfunctional. Nothing happens in a vacuum. We can't put profit over people in society and wonder why society loses its humanity. And then we inflict police terror to oppress and suppress all of the millions that our government had just systematically disenfranchised. When cops have quotas, think about this. When cops have quotas put on them, they have to raise revenue to stay operational. When the government starves police departments of the dollars it needs to operate, it forces cops to have quotas and to get revenue to stay operational and keep their jobs. So this guarantees that cops will then target the most vulnerable communities to fill those quotas, because nobody cares if you're using heavy-handed tactics in the most vulnerable communities. If you use those same heavy-handed tactics, on the Upper East Side of New York, say Wall Street, one phone call to the mayor and that cop's out of a job, or the cop's demoted. So they know not to go after the wealthy and powerful and influential to fill their quotas. They have to go after the most vulnerable. And think about this. The most vulnerable communities are vulnerable specifically because of this artificial scarcity of and economic terrorism, specifically, the systematic abuse of involuntary unemployment. So we're specifically making poor purposely, regardless of their job skills, regardless of their responsibility levels. Our government's forcing millions of people to be unemployed. Even if we have work that needs done, even if every single worker had the most personal responsibility, because our government targets 5% unemployment, we would still be forcing millions of people to be unemployed and so desperate that they'll work for starvation wages under horrible conditions. So this is why we say involuntary unemployment creates starvation wage environments. This is how, and over time, this is how don't make enough money to buy what they disposable income to buy production. And again, this is not my opinion. This is evidenced by our record amounts of private household debt. That's because there's not enough living wage jobs to go around. People are forced to work these starvation wage jobs supported by involuntary unemployment. And then, that forces, if you can't make ends meet with a job, if you do everything right, get a good education, you follow the laws, you get a job, and you can't make ends meet, then that means you're being forced onto the black market. Our government is systematically disenfranchising millions like this and forcing them the black market to make ends meet. They don't want to live like this. They have to survive. When you can't eat, civility goes out the window. So that's why then the government has a profit justice system to suppress and oppress all the millions of people that we are systematically to be, and so and if you don't go onto the black market to make ends meet, then the other option is you have to go into tons and tons of private debt, and that's unsustainable. Private debt always dries up. All right, so this makes us live a precarious existence. It's artificial scarcity. It's untapped productive capacity. All right. So what that means is um, uh, our government can always spend the dollars required as the spend the dollars required up front. We can deficit spend enough up front. We can target our federal budget deficit to true full employment with a federally guaranteed living wage job program for everyone who wants one. So what that means is our currency issuing federal government can always spend the dollars required up front to buy up all unemployment with a federally guaranteed living wage job program and balance our economy up front, maximizing our productive capacity, rebuilding our community ways that, rebuilding our communities in green, sustainable ways that meet everybody's base needs with essential goods and services. Think about a federal job guarantee. This is a democratic means of production. It's capable of increasing any socially valuable production that we need for domestic tranquility, to ensure domestic tranquility, as is mandated by our Constitution. So, if we need energy, we got care. We got it. If we need labor for education, we got it. We need labor for infrastructure. We got it. To improve our standard of living, we got labor, sitting there. Why on earth would anyone think it would be better for our government to force millions of people to be unemployed and poor while our communities are crumbling in dire need of work all over America? That's insane. That's untapped productive capacity. The right used to always be the one saying that the left wing were moochers. No, they don't want to work. They want free stuff. Turns out that's just another lie and scare tactic. The reality is we all want to work. Nobody wants to be a criminal. Nobody wants to live on food stamps. No one wants to have to look over their shoulder every day. All right. We would all rather have a living wage job and hope for tomorrow, hope for a better tomorrow. All right. We would all rather do that. And our government can easily do it. All we have to do is demand it be done. All right. The mainstream lies and scare tactics are designed specifically to make people believe that we're individually powerless and the government is powerless too. Our federal government is financially broke and it's impotent to make any kind of meaningful change. So don't even bother making demands of your federal government. Don't even bother reading your Constitution and demanding that it be satisfied, because our government simply can't. We would love to give you education for all. We would love to give you health care for all, but we just gives them air cover. This is how they keep us on the hamster wheel of life, being counterproductive to our own progress. All right. If people think that by government spending today and meeting our needs today, that this is somehow a burden on future generations, that somehow our national debt is somehow a burden on future generations, well, then these people will accept artificial scarcity that kills today. And they'll accept it today and think that they're being fiscally responsible, protecting future generations. It's completely asinine. That's how they keep us on the hamster wheel. No, the national debt is never a burden on anybody unless it's too small, meaning our federal government, the currency issuer, is starving our economy of public spending as it targets 5% unemployment and creates starvation wage environments, and also imposing on us essential public goods and services and making them private and for profit and therefore incapable of meeting everybody's needs. So therefore incapable of satisfying our public purpose as it's satisfied by the Constitution, incapable of being sustainable. All right, this is how they do it. This is the neoliberal way to privatize public space. And people need to understand, though, the only way we're vulnerable to private debt in the banks and the predators is if our currency issuing federal government fails to do its job as the currency issuer up front, all right, if we collectively force Congress to spend the required dollars to buy up all unemployment with a federally guaranteed living wage job for every person who wants it, then people aren't dependent on private credit just to survive. People don't need credit cards for milk and eggs and etc. People aren't vulnerable to predatory lending just to survive. All right. So it would eliminate a lot of problems, a lot of instability in the markets. And the federal job guarantee itself is an economic stabilizer that runs counter-cyclical to the natural ups and downs of the business cycle. So when the business cycle goes down and we have an economic depression and they are laying people off, those people are losing income. They can't buy production. So then business stops producing even more. And then they have to lay off even more people who then lose their incomes and they can't buy production. It's a downward spiral to the bottom. It can only be stopped by intervention of the current issuing stabilizers. Right now, we use economic stabilizers like food stamps, welfare, unemployment insurance, but these are half measures. They're designed to give people a bare minimum of income to spend and keep the economy going, to buffer the worst of the recessionary pressures and to shorten the recessionary pressures. But they're half measures. Superior economic stabilizer is the federal true full employment. It's a counterweight to the ups and downs of the business cycle. So it would balance our economy up front with dollars. Everyone would have opportunity and a ladder out of poverty. We would have our needs met with essential public goods and services in a green, sustainable way without raising taxes or making cuts. Again, because the currency issuer never needs revenue or an income of any kind. Article 1, Section 8 mandates the tax to provide for our general welfare and common defense. So that necessarily means our federal government never needs to find dollars or income of any kind. All right, that means that our government is the currency issuer. It has to spend dollars into existence before you could even take taxes back out, before you could even sell bonds. Think about that. Oh, we have to raise taxes on this person to, have nice things. This is a right-wing scare tactic and a lie meant to make people oppose public purpose spending. All right. No, your taxes don't got to go up to pay for nice things. The currency issuer never needs revenue. All right. In fact, federal revenue is destroyed or deleted upon receipt at the federal level. It only even exists as an accounting identity on a spreadsheet somewhere. That's it. All federal spending is brand new dollars created by congressional law from thin air. So dollars are simply a law to satisfy tax. We can't run out of laws. Dollars are just a law to satisfy tax. This is not rocket science. So all that matters is our currency issuing government spends the dollars required, strengthening our productive capacity to ensure we have enough real resources created for any dollars to buy. That's what it's about. That's what it's about. The money part of the equation is always infinite for our federal government. The only thing that matters is our government deficit spends enough to invest in our productive capacity to ensure we have enough real resources created and available for any to buy. Either way, if we have the real resources to meet the demand for any program, then our currency issuing federal government can always afford that program without raising taxes or making cuts, and it'll be non-inflationary spending. It's all about supply and demand. Supply being production of real resources, and demand being dollars. That's it. This is not complex. So, in other words, if we have the real resources, if we have the hospitals and doctors and the medicine to meet the demand for healthcare in America, then we can always afford universal health care in America without raising taxes or making cuts, and it'll always be non-inflationary spending. The supply and balance an economy. So I got to go. Remember, if you don't want a dysfunctional and violent society, then we have to oppose systemic abuse carried out in our name. We can't allow our government to put profit over people's lives. We can't like enemy combatants and then wonder why people respond like insurgents. Thanks, everybody. Stand up and speak out.